Joining me today is Steve Norton, the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Center for Public Policy Studies. And Steve, you know, when you said demographics, I've seen it, and we live in the Lakes region. We've looked at those issues, and you know, in the 23 years that we've been up here, I've sort of anecdotally noticed some of these demographic shifts, and some of it can be attributed to 2008. But my suspicion is it's bigger than just that.
No, it is much bigger.
So I'm happy to hear you're confirming that. What can you, if somebody's listening or a policymaker, and they haven't gone to your information on your website, what should they know about the demographic changes that we're seeing in New Hampshire?
What they should know is that they've fundamentally changed. In 1968, if you stood in southern New Hampshire and looked north, you would have seen about 700,000 people. Now it's 1.3 million people. That means our population almost doubled in the past 40 years. That's incredible growth. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, our population grew at about 24% per decade. And in the last decade, it grew at 6%, and it's anticipated to grow at 3% over the next decade. So migration into New Hampshire has fundamentally changed. Those were the baby boomers who were moving here. So related to much slower growth in population, you're now starting to see the baby boomers age. And so we're getting older. We're the third oldest state in the country. We have a median age of 41.7. To put that in some context, Utah has a median age less than 30.
But we also have to have, I mean, per capita, I mean, other than the Boston region, the number of schools, UNH, Plymouth, Colby-Sawyer, New England College, Southern New Hampshire University, I mean, Keene State, we've got a lot of young people studying in the state.
Yep, they tend to leave the state once they graduate. And that's been a dynamic since the 70s. And you can imagine that that makes sense. A 21-year-old, a 22-year-old, 23-year-old is going to go someplace else to gain some experience, have a different type of social life than one does have growing up in New Hampshire. And maybe they come back. And that's been historically what's happened. 30-somethings migrated to New Hampshire.
And that stopped.
That stopped. And to some extent, there's another dynamic going on, particularly in our more rural areas of the state. There's continuing migration out of those rural areas. So in the North Country, they are continuing to see population declines and stagnant population in many parts other than those areas around the lakes.
Are there any policy implications for that? Where does that feed into the policy?
So absolutely has implications for social support services for the elderly. The number of people over the age of 85 is anticipated to almost triple in the next 15 years. And those over 85 are the most likely to require some help. And that's particularly troubling in rural areas where people are living in their homes. So that's one policy implication. That's a funding implication also for counties in the state. There's also an issue about what happens to schools when there are fewer kids. And I know we're going to talk about that perhaps later. Those are the two big ones that we're looking at.
So let's talk about the elderly. And I mean, so as you start to have more people, if more people are going to be 85, that means relatively quickly, more people are going to be 75 and 80.
Right.
I mean, and that's at an age in our winters. Yes. That can prove huge challenges.
Yep, yep.
And you also connected it to the county. Is the county the safety net?
The county is the safety net for long-term care support services for the elderly. And they run nursing homes, county nursing homes. They run, often in some instances, other types of long-term care services, residential services. And they finance all of the public long-term care safety net.
And their budgets have been going up relatively quickly, and it's sort of an thing we don't pay attention to politically.
That's true, and we're doing some work right now trying to simulate the impact on county property tax rates that have to go to fund the, as you can imagine, if they have to care for more and more services or more individuals, the costs are going to go up.
When will that'll be published on your website?
It will be. Yep.
And so it'll be available for people to look at.
That's correct. Yep.
Well, we're out of time in this segment. When we return, we're going to continue our conversation focusing on education. So please stay with us.